We're holding by Perek Tes.
Yes, yeah.
Page Pevav, opposite of page 170. So in the previous Perek, in Perek Ches, the larger context over here is that we're trying to understand Achdus Hashem, the unity of Hashem within Himself. How Hashem Himself is Achdus Pshuta. How Hashem Himself is one and, as you say, one and indivisible, not divided into different details and faculties, etc. And the Alter Rebbe says that in general, to try to understand Hashem is somewhat of a futile endeavor, not somewhat, a completely futile endeavor, because Hashem exists totally out of our context of reality, out of our experience. In order to explain this a little better, to give us a little understanding how much Hashem is beyond our context of understanding and our reality, so Alter Rebbe first examines what is our reality, what is our own framework within which we operate. So Alter Rebbe explains that the human being is a very sophisticated and complicated being. We are multifaceted horizontally as well as laterally. In other words, we have, if you're talking about laterally, we have many different types of midas and feelings and thoughts, but also horizontally speaking, we start off with Chachma, which is at the top of our intellectual capabilities, and our psyche includes Seichel and Midas and Machshava and Dibur and Maisa, but ultimately everything begins with Seichel, everything begins with Chachma. Our whole reality exists within the parameters that start with Chachma and ends with Maisa. And we ourselves can understand just how far Chachma is from Maisa. Chachma is the highest capacity that we have, wisdom. And then Maisa is physical, it's action. Think about it for a second. Our ability to act, our ability to physically move, to move ourselves, to move something, we share that faculty with grasshoppers. It's not what makes us humans. Even the fact that we have feelings we share with animals. What makes the human being is the intellectual, Chachma, Bina, and Das. But we encompass everything. Everything begins with Chachma. And as we've spoken many times, the human being is a complex organism. I'm talking spiritually. So that it begins in the mind, and it trickles down to the heart, then it trickles down to Machshava, then to Dibur, and to Maisa. But obviously, you cannot begin to compare Chachma to Maisa. The distance that separates the two within the human being, again, is separated 5 levels. Seichel to Midas, to Machshava, to Dibur, and then to Maisa. So that is the human reality. The human framework begins with Chachma, that's our highest faculty, and ends with Maisa, which is our lowest faculty. Inside, Perek Tes. Ava legabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's all the way it is by human being. But by Hashem, Madregas HaChachma, the level of Chachma, Shehitchilas Machshava Virishisa, which is the highest level within the intellectual capacities, He Soif Maisa Etzloi, is the Soif Maisa. We say Soif Maisa b'machshava tchila. The Alter Rebbe is borrowing this terminology. Tchilas machshava, the Alter Rebbe is saying, is a reference to Chachma. That's the highest faculty within the intellectual faculties, within Seichel. And to Hashem, that's like Soif Maisa. That's like the lowest level. That's like Maisa. The Hainu meaning Shenachsheves ki ilu hi bechines umadreges asiya legabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Relative to Hashem, Chachma. The way we look down at Maisa and say, wow, that's the lowest level possible. Hashem views Chachma, which is the highest level in our experience, Hashem looks at that and says, wow, that's the lowest thing that there is. Kidiksiv, as the pasuk says in Tehillim, Kulam bechachma asisa, which we know that simple pshat means that Hashem made everything with wisdom. But in a deeper level, this means Vehaemunah. It means to say, Loimar, sheke'erech hachayish sheba'asiya gufnis v'gashmius. Le'erech chayis hachachma, just like if you take the spiritual energy which exists in Maisa, relative to the spiritual energy that exists in Chachma, Shehireshis u'makar hachayis ba'adam, which in the human being, Chachma is the very first and the very highest, the source of all the energy in the person. V'chol habruim, that's the way it is in the human being, and that's the way it is in all of creations, Gashmim and all physical creations. Shu ka'ayin legabi chayish beis hadibur. So we know the energy which is in Maisa is literally nothing relative to the energy which is in words. Words is spiritual, words is higher. Shehu ka'ayin, but the energy that there is in words, in our speech, is nothing legabi chayish be'etzis machshava, relative to the energy which is the level above speech, which is machshava. Shehu ka'ayin, and the energy which is in machshava is like nothing legabi chayish u'mailas hamidais, relative to the energy that exists within emotions, which we know that, as we spoke last week, that where do all thoughts come from? All the thoughts come from emotions. And emotion, shehu ka'ayin, the energy which is in the midas and the emotions, is like nothing, ligabi chayis u'mailas u'madrigas, relative to the energy and to the high level of hachachma, bina, vedas, the intellectual capacities, which are makar hamidas. So kulam bechachma sisa means to Hashem, chachma is like asiya. The energy is in us. The energy in chachma is so minimal and so nothing to Hashem, just like in the human being, Maisa is nothing compared to chachma. To Hashem, chachma is also nothing. Although chachma is the beginning and the source of all the energy in all the worlds, but relative to Hashem Himself, Hamerumam v'hamisnase ribay revavis madreges rebemus yoiser mimrebemus madreges hachachma al beginnes chayis shabasiya. Hashem is removed from chachma tens of thousands upon tens of thousands of levels, more so than chachma is removed from the chayis shabasiya, which is in a physical act. Chachma is removed from Maisa only by 5 levels. Remember, we have 5, in the human being there are 5 levels. Maisa, Dibur, Machshava, Midas, and Seichel. Hashem transcends and is above and beyond the level of Chachma, tens of thousands of Madrigas. Ka'elu, sorry. Revavis madregas ka'elu, tens and thousands such levels, ad ein kates. And actually, Hashem is infinitely removed from Chachma. So if we want to get a context of what does it mean, how far we are from Hashem, our highest level that we can experience, which is Chachma, is infinitely removed from Hashem. So again, it's like that's why kulam bechachma asisa. The chachma is removed as asiya is from chachma. That's as removed as Hashem is from chachma. But the question then becomes: 1 second, what are we saying? We're saying chachma is removed from asiya 5 levels. Hashem is removed from chachma tens of thousands, infinite levels. So why are we saying kulam bechachma asisa? Why are we saying that Hashem is as removed from chachma as chachma is removed from asiya? That would seem to be an inaccurate comparison. But Rebbe explains, Rak only human beings, creations, we can only understand the difference between Chachma, Shehir which is our highest level, L'madregas Asiya Shvela to Asiya, which is our lowest level. In other words, that's the span that we can envision, our highest level to our lowest level. That's why we say, if we want to try to understand, we say to Hashem, we say that to Hashem, Chachma is like Asiya. Dahainu, meaning. Okay, actually, let's stop over here for a second. We're saying the greatest possible distance that's possible in the human experience. We're saying, so we're saying by Hashem also, that's how removed he is from Chachma. The truth is, he's much more removed from Chachma than Chachma is from Maisa. But the human being can't, the idea of infinity doesn't enter the mind. So that's why the pasuk says, Kulam b'chachma asisa, to give us a little understanding, a little of a feel for just how removed Hashem is from the level of Chachma. So we're saying that just like the distance that there is between our highest level, which is Chachma, and our lowest level, which is Maisa, that's how far Hashem is removed from Chachma. But in truth, it's much more than that. But we can't imagine more than that. So that's why that is the mashal that is given. But then there's another point. By you saying Kulam b'chachma asisa, by comparing Chachma to Maisa, there's another point that's being made. Let's do this inside. The Hainu, meaning Leimar to say, Shuram v'nisa, the Hashem is lofty and exalted, v'naila, and so elevated, ilu yirav mi'oid madreges ha'chachma, so much higher than Chachma, v'leishayich klal liyaches etzli shum inyan ha'misyaches l'chachma. So therefore, you can't attribute to Hashem Chachma in any which way, because he's so removed from Chachma. Even if you want to say, even if you're trying to praise Hashem and say it in a way of Maila. Going, for example, how about saying about Hashem, that it is impossible for any creation, in the higher worlds, in the lower worlds, to understand Hashem's wisdom or Hashem's essence. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it definitely is.
You're saying it's a fair statement, and would be you're saying that would be a praise to Hashem. A praise would be praising to Hashem, to say that Hashem is so great that no creation, not in this world, not in the higher worlds, none of them can understand Hashem's wisdom or Hashem's essence. That would seem to be a beautiful thing to say in Hashem, right? Says the Alter Rebbe, we can't say that. We can't say that about Hashem. Why? So let's do this first outside, then we'll do it inside. There are some times that we praise something by defining it. We define the greatness of something, whatever object it may be and whatever its greatness may be. Sometimes when something is so great, we can't define its greatness by describing what it is, and then we describe its greatness by describing what it isn't. And in the words of Kabbalah, this is known as Yidias Hashlila. Yidias, understanding, knowing. Hashlila, Hashlila means the negative.
Oh, Hashlila.
You don't know the positive, you know the negative. So for example, imagine if you went into two shiurim, from two Rashi Shivas. You walked out of the first one and you said, this shiur was so incredible, and you describe his greatness. It was clear, it was lucid, it was deep. That's a big praise. And then you go into another shiur and you walk out and you say, this shiur was so, this Rashi Shiva is so great. I literally did not understand a word of what he said. Which one is the greater praise?
The first.
The first one?
Yes, if he doesn't understand it, what good is it?
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. You're making an argument, but on the other hand, if you're trying to talk about which one, if the same person walks in here, walks in there, what he's saying is the second Rosh Yeshiva is so great that I can't even relate it. Which means that he's much higher than the first Rosh Yeshiva. His wisdom is much deeper. And there's the idea sometimes when you want to praise something, you say, it's not this, it's not that. It's so much that we can't even understand. But there is a way of praising something by describing not what it is, but by what it isn't. You want to know how great it is? I can't understand it. I can't explain, I can't define, because if I'd be able to define its greatness, then it wouldn't be so great. Think about it that way. The fact that I can't define its greatness tells you just how great it is. But let's take this analogy a drop further. So let's say you walked out of a shiur ber, a yeshiva, and you walk out and you say, so one person walks out and says, it was an amazing shiur, and defines the greatness of the shiur. Another person walks out and says, the ideas there were so deep, I didn't understand. Third person walks out of the shiur and says, the ideas in the shiur, the ideas that the Rosh Yeshiva expressed were so deep, they were so profound, that I couldn't touch them with my finger.
Both of them saying the same thing almost. The one who said, I don't understand, or I can't touch with my
I want you to imagine that. I want you to imagine someone walking out of a shiur and saying, the ideas there were so profound and so deep that I couldn't touch the ideas with my finger. In the words of the Alter Rebbe, which we'll read soon, Kol Hashemea Yitzchak Le, whoever hears that either will be like you, will be completely puzzled, and what's he talking about? Or probably the person will laugh at the ridiculousness of the statement. The idea was so deep that he couldn't touch it. Now, was this person saying something which wasn't true?
He doesn't know.
It's correct.
He doesn't know. He doesn't understand it. So how does he know that it's correct?
The person says again, the idea was so deep that I couldn't touch the idea with my finger. That's a ridiculous statement. Why is it more ridiculous than saying the idea was so deep that I couldn't understand it? Both of them are accurate, by the way. In other words, you can't understand the idea. That's accurate, and you couldn't touch the idea. But why is one a laughable statement, and one of them is a statement that makes sense? One of them is a praise, actually. To say the idea was so deep that I couldn't understand it is a praise for the idea. It tells you how deep the idea is. But to say that the idea was so deep that I couldn't touch it, again, is comical. Why is that?
Because it's not tangible. It's not something you can touch. It's not physical.
It's not physical.
It's spiritual.
In different words, when you want to say, even when you want to negate something, you only negate something when there's some sort of possibility that you have to negate. So for example, an idea could be understood. So for me to come out and say, I didn't understand the idea, okay, that makes sense. But ideas can't be touched. So to say, I can't touch an idea is just as ridiculous as saying that I could touch an idea. Because when you say, I can't touch this idea because it is so deep, what are you implying? The implication is that this idea was so deep that my puny little finger couldn't touch it. But if the idea was a little less deep, maybe if it was a little of a simpler idea, and maybe if my finger was a little stronger, maybe it was turbo powered, then maybe I would be able to touch the idea. That's ridiculous. You can't touch ideas.
It's abstract to begin with.
You can't touch ideas. The world of touch and the world of intellect and wisdom are two different worlds.
You're not praising the ideas, you're praising the teacher for his ability to articulate and make people understand.
Okay.
So if you don't understand, then the teacher is not doing it.
Okay. So I hear what you're saying. So let me rephrase, and let's not talk about teachers and let's talk about ideas. You bring up a good point. One idea is simple. Another idea, okay, the theory of relativity, which even though that most people, theory of relativity, yeah, E equals m squared, what is it, right?
MC squared.
But I believe that it was said that even at the times of Einstein, there were like 3 people who understood the idea, exactly what it means. So it would be fair to say the idea is so deep, I don't understand it. And that's, when you say that's praising the idea, that's telling you how deep the idea is. I can't understand it. But what if you say that relativity is the theory of relativity is so deep that I can't touch it with my finger? Again, that's ridiculous. Why? Because the world of touch and the world of intellect, they don't occupy the same world. So when you have two things that don't occupy the same world, then putting them together not only in a positive sense, but even negating their association and their connection is also ridiculous. Because you only need to negate something which is a possibility. You only need to negate something which two things that exist within the same world, and therefore you need to negate it. But when something is in a different world altogether, even negating it is silly. It's like mixing metaphors. It's like me telling you that, I have a couch in my house that's so heavy that I can't drink it. There's something went wrong over there in the translation. There is no connection between heaviness and drinking. There's no connection between touching and the depth of wisdom. They occupy different worlds. So again, to say that something is so heavy that I can't lift it makes sense. To say that something that's so heavy I can't drink it doesn't make sense. You can negate, but when you negate something, it has to be part of the same world. To negate something when there is no connection in the first place makes no sense. You're following? So let's go back to our previous statement. We asked, if someone says that Hashem is so lofty that I can't understand him, is that sensible? And some people here said yes. The Alter Rebbe says absolutely not. Saying that Hashem is so lofty that I can't understand him is like saying that I can't touch the theory of relativity. It's the same thing. It makes no sense. Why? Because what is your implication? Again, let's go back again. Then when you say that the reason why saying that a certain intellectual idea, intellectual concept is so lofty and so deep that I can't touch it, the reason why it's laughable is because even by negating it, when you say I can't touch it, you're implying a certain connection. And if those certain conditions would be met, then I would be able to touch it. That's ridiculous. When I'm saying there's a certain idea, it's so lofty I can't understand it, that makes sense. Why? Because you know what? If the idea was a little less lofty and if I was a little smarter, I would be able to understand it. So when I'm negating the possibility of me understanding, what I'm saying is, my mind is too small, that idea is too big, so therefore I can't understand it. But if my mind was a little bigger, if that idea was a little less complicated, I would be able to understand it. So therefore negating it makes sense because they occupy the same world. Again, the idea, the concept, to put it in different words, relativity is an intellectual thing that could theoretically be understood by a mind. And therefore, it makes sense that if you don't understand it, to negate it and say, I don't understand it. But to say that you can't touch a concept, what are you negating? That's silly. When you say that Hashem is so great I can't understand him, the implication is that because my IQ is only 160, and because Hashem is so deep, therefore I can't understand Hashem. But if I was a little smarter, then maybe I'd be able to understand Hashem. But as it is, I can't understand him because he's so... The problem with that assertion is Hashem can't be understood. Not because we're not smart enough to understand him, but because trying to understand Hashem with intellect is like trying to touch intellect with your finger. It's the wrong tool. Hashem is not graspable by intellect because he's beyond intellect. So to say Hashem is so deep I can't understand him is actually a silly statement. You understand why? Because of what is your implication?
Yeah, but the inverse was you would be.
Maybe if I was a little smarter, and maybe if he wasn't so deep, maybe I'd be able to... You can't understand Hashem because he's not graspable by seichel, because he's not seichel, he's not an intellectual concept. He is above and beyond. So the relationship that our mind, our chachma has with Hashem is similar to the relationship between chachma and maisa. Just like maisa can't touch chachma, our minds, our chachma can't touch Hashem, can't understand Hashem. Kula bechachma asisa. That's again going back to the depth of what we're saying. that just like in our experience there is Chachma and Maisa, and they occupy different worlds entirely, and you can't touch one with the other. The same thing as Hashem is equally removed from Chachma, and our Chachma cannot apprehend and understand Hashem, because, again, us trying to understand Hashem is like trying to touch the theory of relativity. It's the same ridiculous. The fact that we can't understand Hashem is not because our intellect is deficient. It's because intellect is deficient. Not because our intellect is deficient. Because again, intellect is as capable of understanding Hashem as a finger is of touching an intellectual concept. And Shlomo HaMelech, who was the wisest person who ever existed, so he says, Amarti echkama, I said, I'm so smart, but it's beyond me, the Eibishter is beyond me. There's a pasuk that says, Pesi yamin l'chol davar, a fool believes everything, and the Medrash says on this, Zeh Moshe Rabbeinu. Relative to Hashem, Moshe is a fool, just like all of us. The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was an embodiment of Chachma Vatzilus didn't make any difference, because Chachma Vatzilus, not only our Chachma, Chachma Vatzilus trying to grasp Hashem, again, is like trying to touch an intellectual concept. That's how removed Hashem is from our experience. Let's do this inside. Let's start again from 4 lines from the top of the 172. We can't attribute to Hashem anything that relates to Chachma, even if you're trying to praise Hashem. Going, for example, love to say regarding Hashem, if someone were to say about Hashem that it is beyond the ability of any creation, whether from the higher worlds or from the lower worlds, to grasp Hashem's wisdom or to grasp Hashem's essence. You can't say that. Why? The whole idea of grasping, of comprehending, only applies to an intellectual concept. So regarding an intellectual concept, you can say either you could understand it or possibly you could say you don't understand it because the idea is so deep. Again, sometimes we do understand, and sometimes we can say something is so profound I don't understand. And that's, by the way, that's a greater praise than to say that I do understand it. But Hashem, who is above and beyond, it's impossible to say regarding him, we can't say, we can't comprehend him because the concept is too deep. Because Hashem is not, he's not intellect. Someone who says about Hashem, I can't understand Hashem. It's like saying about a very deep and profound concept. Imagine someone were to say, I can't touch it with my hands, because the idea is too deep. Whoever hears this statement will still laugh at the person. Why? Because touch, the capacity of touch only applies to something physical, and it's fastest be a dime, which can be grasped by the hand. The kocha mamish in the exact same way. Nechsheves legabe Kadosh Baruch Hu madreges hasechel v'asaga to Hashem. Sechel and asaga is kasiya magashmish mamish. Is mamish like kasiya. So again, chachma to Hashem is like touch relative to chachma. And it's not only our seichel. Even the comprehension of the malachim in the higher worlds, intellectual malachim. Even the level of chachma vatzilus, hamachayis kulam, that gives life to everything, that also cannot grasp Hashem. Kidiksiva, as the pasuk says, Kulam b'chachma asisa, that everything to Hashem chachma is like asiyah. So we have an idea of how trying to understand Hashem is futile. It's futile, not because we're not smart enough. That's the whole point. Sometimes, the Alter Rebbe, I guess the paradigm shift in this Perek is that we think sometimes that we're not smart enough to understand Hashem. And that's not correct. Because the implication again would be if we were smarter, we would understand Hashem. But when we realize that Hashem is beyond comprehension, not beyond our comprehension, beyond comprehension, we realize that trying to understand Hashem is like trying to touch an idea. Yes?
Why do we have to understand Hashem?
So,
what we have to do.
Yeah, this is part of a larger idea that Rebbe is building up over here, which is we need to understand the Achdus of Hashem. So in order to, there are questions. So the first thing that Rebbe is going to lay down, before he's going to give some sort of answer, is the fact that we can't understand the inner workings of the spheres and Hashem. It's not, there isn't a big question about that. We don't understand anything. But it's also leading to a certain understanding of Hashem, which we'll get to as we move along.
We are lesser than what we would like to know.
Sorry?
A lesser understanding of Hashem in a different concept, so that we can't understand this. This is what we ultimately would like to understand, but if not, we're going to understand Hashem in a lesser amount.
Hold your question.
Okay.
We'll get, in other words, instead of me trying to give it a teaser, a spoiler in 10 minutes, as we go along, you'll understand why what we're saying here is important to where we're going. This past week, as in yesterday actually, was Yud Shvat, was the anniversary, the yard site of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak of Lubavitch. He passed away in 1950. And when he passed away, so the leadership was assumed by the current Rebbe, his son-in-law. So by Chassidim, there's no such thing as not having a Rebbe. There's always a Rebbe. So the moment that the previous Rebbe passed away, V'zarach Hashem Meshubah Hashem, one set, so one sun sets and the other the other sun rises. But officially, the Rebbe accepted the leadership exactly 1 year later on Yud Shvat of 1951. And actually this year, because as I mentioned, the Friedrich Rebbe passed away in 1950, so now we're in 2020, so it's Tafshin Yud through Tafshin Pei. It was the 70th anniversary of the Rebbe becoming Rebbe. So it was a very big simcha. Many, Crown Heights was flooded with people from all over the world who came in. And when the Rebbe became Rebbe in 1950, we've spoken about this in the past, that the Rebbe entered the scene of a traumatized Klal Yisrael. This was 5 years after the conclusion of the Holocaust, when 6 million were killed, of the best and of the greatest tzaddikim. And just forget about the tzaddikim. I mean, don't forget about them. What I'm saying is everyone had a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, or uncle. Klal Yisrael was collectively grieving at that time and traumatized. And as we spoke on other occasions, what's amazing is how the Rebbe, he didn't, his approach wasn't, let's grieve, let's lick our wounds, let's rebuild what was. The Rebbe totally, from the first moment, the Rebbe went on the offense, and the Rebbe was like, we're going to take over the world. The whole world has to know about Hashem and learn Torah and do mitzvahs, and we're going to bring Mashiach. Was a very optimistic and look much more than just, okay, let's rebuild the Chassidus that we have over here. And obviously that unfolded over the next 70 years. It took many years for the Chassidim to realize what the Rebbe was up to. Although no one understood. Because the Rebbe really, if you learn the very first Maimer that the Rebbe said, the very first Chassidic discourse which the Rebbe said on Yud Shvat of 1951, it's all there. The Rebbe lays out his plan completely about what's going to be, and that we have to go and spread the name of Hashem in the entire world and teach everyone Aleph Beis and teach everyone Torah mitzvahs, and we're going to bring Mashiach. But I don't think anyone who was there really took the Rebbe very seriously. In other words, the 300 people or 400 people who were gathered over there. But the Rebbe had this forward look. But there were many people who were stuck. And there were many people in that time who would write to the Rebbe. There are many letters where the Rebbe was responding to people who would say that they don't believe in God because where was God during the Holocaust? And that was a question that the Rebbe had to deal with very frequently and very often. And it's hard to blame people who went through the Holocaust and had a, what do you call a mashber, how do you say that? Had a crisis of faith because of it. And the Rebbe very often would answer, so you're saying you don't believe in God? Well, let's analyze this for a second. You're saying you don't believe in Hashem, or you have these big questions on Hashem, because in your assumption, there should be a God who makes sure that there is no evil in this world, and that everyone gets exactly what they deserve, and the good get the good that they deserve, and the bad get the bad that they deserve. There should be Hashem who is managing every detail of everything that happens in the world, and there shouldn't be injustice, and there shouldn't be unfairness, and everything should be run exactly the way it's supposed to. So that's your assumption of who Hashem is. Now, any power that has the ability to do that, any God that has the ability to control a world with all the billions of people over here, as well as all the other elements of the world, all of them constantly crisscrossing each other. You know how every effect has a counter effect, and still to be able to make sure that every single entity in this world is cared for, taken care of, and gets exactly what is needed and what's good and right and just for it. That's obviously a power that is an intellect which is obviously exponentially greater than what we have. No one here can do that. The biggest supercomputer couldn't do that. To be able to run all the moving pieces throughout the entire world, making sure that everything is running exactly. This is obviously a superior intelligence which we can't grasp. Now, so you're assuming that there is Hashem that has this superior intelligence, this intelligence which is well above and beyond what the human being is able to have. So if Hashem has this superior intelligence, what makes you think that you should be able to understand the conclusions that he reaches? Why would you think that you'd be able to understand everything? The very parameters that you're setting for Hashem require you to accept that you're not going to understand everything that he does. It's an interesting way of when you're asking and saying, where was Hashem? In its essence, you're acknowledging that there is this Hashem, or you have this expectation that there should be Hashem with superior intelligence. Okay, if so, don't be surprised when sometimes things happen and you don't understand them. And that's a somewhat idea over here that we're talking about also over here. We have to understand again that Hashem, here's even an even deeper idea. It's not that Hashem has greater intelligence or higher intelligence, in which case it would make sense to say, but I can't understand it because it's too high. Hashem actually is above and beyond the idea of Chachma and intelligence in the first place. But here we stumble upon a problem, which is, we're saying over here that Hashem is as removed from Chachma as much as as we are removed from, as Chachma is removed from Maisa. And then we open up the Torah and we see that Hashem is called a Chacham. How does that fit with our thesis over here? And it's not only Chachma. Chachma is not, Hashem is called a Chacham, and he's called a Chassid, and he's called a Rahman. But if we're saying that Hashem is infinitely removed from all of these different attributes, more so even than Chacham is removed from Maisa, then how is it that Hashem actually is called a Chacham? Umash HaKadosh Baruch Hu, 7 lines from the bottom. Umash HaKadosh Baruch Hu Nikra Chacham, because of that which the Torah talks about the Eibishter and describes him as a Chacham. The Gam Chazal Kinulei Madrigus Umaylas HaChachma. And also Chazal talk about Hashem and ascribe to him Chachma. So Hainu Shu Mishum Shahu Makar HaChachma. That's because he is the source of Chachma. Not that he is Chachma, but Hashem is the source of Chachma. Does that answer our question? Seemingly not yet. So we call Hashem by the name of everything that he created? The fact that he is the source of Chachma, that he created Chachma, why would we call him Chacham? So the Rebbe continues, Shemamenu Yisbarech Nimshach V'netzal Muhus Madrigas Chachma Ilah Sheba'ilam Atzilus. From Hashem came forth, emerged, and emanated the substance which is the level of Chachma in the world of Atzilus. V'chein Rachum, V'chosid, and the same thing Hashem is called Arachum, he's called compassionate, V'chosid, and he's called a Chosid, Al Shem Shehu Makar HaRachmim V'chsadim, because he is the source of compassion and kindness. V'chein Shaar HaMidos, and same thing as all the other Midos, Shekulam, all of them Nimshechu, emerged, V'netzlu Mimenu Yizbarach, and they emanated from Hashem. So here the Alter Rebbe is telling us a very deep idea. We said Hashem is the source of Chachma because Chachma emerged from and emanated from Hashem. And the same thing is with all the other Midos. Hashem is the source of them and they emanated and emerged from Hashem. Which word did the Alter Rebbe not use over here? Even though I used it earlier. Maybe I was building a straw man. The Alter Rebbe doesn't say the word created. It doesn't say Hashem created Chachma. It doesn't say Hashem created the other Midas. Again, the words he uses, like we'll get to the Maral next week.
He's the source of it.
He's the source of it, and they emerged from him and emanated from him. HaMakar, he's the Makar, and Nimshechu v'netzlu, or Nimshach v'netzal, they emerged from. Netzal is emanate, to emanate, like light emanates from a candle. Like it says by Moshe Rabbeinu. It says over there, V'atzalta min haruach, you will emanate from your spirit onto the 70. It's not that Moshe created a spirit, but he emanated from his spirit upon the 70 elders, and that's why they all also became prophets. And this is a very important distinction in Chassidus and in Kabbalah. There's a difference between something that emanates from Hashem and something that's created by Hashem. In terms of worlds, when we're talking over here about, when we talk about Hashem being a Chacham or a Chassid or a Rachman, we're describing the Midos of Hashem in the world of Atzilus. The word Atzilus means an emanation.
Atzil, you said.
So because Hashem emanated the Midah of Chachma in Atzilus, so therefore we call Hashem a Chacham. Because Hashem emanated from Hashem the midah of Chesed or Rachmim, so therefore we call him a Chassid or a Rachum. But again, Hashem himself is beyond all this, but these things emanated from Hashem. After the world of Atzilus, you have the world of Bria. What is the world of Bria? The world of creation. That means, the implication is that the world of Atzilus is not a creation. The world of Atzilus, as its name connotes, is an emanation from Hashem. Whereas in the world of Bria, and obviously everything beneath the world of Bria, over there already we have creation. What is the difference between a creation and emanation? So even in English, it works with the words. Something which is created is something which is a new entity, which is outside of the creator. It's created. What does the word creator, creation imply? Something beforehand there wasn't anything there, and suddenly something new has been created.
I just looked up the word emanate. It says to come out from the source.
Come out from the source, exactly.
Yeah.
When something comes out of the source and assumes an identity, it has an ego, that is a creation, that is the world of Bria. The world of Bria is a very, very holy world, but it is a world that, at least in its own consciousness, has separated from Hashem. Is it really separated from Hashem? No. That we already discussed in the earlier chapters, how everything that's a creation is really, it doesn't really exist on its own. But in the world of Atzilus, is you have Hashem himself, the light of Hashem himself. The light of Hashem in the world of Atzilus assumes different forms. To be precise, it assumes 10 different forms. Some of the light in the world of Atzilus assumes the form of Chachma, some of Bina, some of Das. So what you have is, this is Hashem, as he assumes. Again, an emanation means it's something which emanates from Hashem. So as the light emanates from Hashem and assumes a certain form, so there Hashem is being a Chacham. The fact that there's Chachma in the world of Bria, that doesn't make Hashem a Chacham. That means that there's a creation called Chachma. We're saying that Hashem is called a Chacham. Why? Because Chachma of Atzilus, Hashem is the Makar, because Hashem is the source of the Chachma of Atzilus, and Chachma emerges and emanates from Hashem. So we have is, the essence of Hashem and the infinite light of Hashem is infinitely removed from Chachma, as we explained earlier. An infinite amount of levels removed from Chachma, even of Chachma of Atzilus. But once the light of Hashem enters the world of Atzilus, and again, the world of Atzilus is completely one with Hashem, it's all an emanation, there's nothing other than Hashem there. So then Hashem assumes the form of Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Chachma, etc. An example that's brought down for this in this form of Kabbalah is imagine if you take a light and you shine it through a colored lens or a colored window, a flashlight. Take 10 flashlights. One has a red lens, one has a blue lens, one has a green lens. So here you have red light, blue light, green light. Now really, the light itself, before it hits the window, the light itself is not any color. It's removed from any color. It has no form. Once the light, however, passes through the lens, so what do we have over here? Red light. It's the light that is red. It's not anything other, there's nothing here other than the light, but the light has become red. So we have Hashem. Hashem himself is like the light, the Eir himself is removed from any form and any color, and to say that it's Chachma is silly. Hashem is above and beyond Chachma. But once the light of Hashem enters the world of Atzilus, suddenly it shines out. And then we have Hashem being a Chacham, which means as Hashem's light flows through the prism of what we call the Kli of Chachma, the vessel of Chachma. And then we have Hashem's light as Hashem becomes a Navin, and Hashem becomes a Chassid, and Hashem becomes a Rachman. And who is this? It's Hashem. Very important to understand. When we say Chacham, we're not talking about something that Hashem does. We're talking actually about Hashem. But it's Hashem, as he passed through that filter in Atzilus. Already we have Hashem assuming different forms. But higher than Atzilus, Hashem is above and beyond everything. So when we say that Kula b'Chachma Asisa, that Chachma is like Asiya, that is the Eir Insaf, which is above the world of Atzilus. Once, however, the Eir enters into the world of Atzilus, then Taka, the Eir, assumes different forms, including the form of Chachma, Chesed, Rachmim, etc. V'derech v'inyan ha'amshacha v'atzilus eich uma. How is it that the light of Hashem emerges, and how is it the light of Hashem emanates? Yadu maskilim is known to those who understand Kabbalah. In other words, this itself is a wonder. How is it that the infinite light of Hashem can enter and express itself as Chachma or Chesed, etc.? That itself is a big wonder. And Dr. Rebbe says that's something which is known to Mekubalim. And Dr. Rebbe is not going to explain that in the text, but he will explain it in the Haggah, which we will Mirz Hashem learn next week. So let's recap what so far we've learned today. Hashem himself is infinitely removed from Chachma, and to the extent that to say that I don't understand Hashem, because Hashem is too deep, which we all walked into the class thinking that it's a wonderful, beautiful thing to say, is actually a ridiculous statement. Because the implication is, again, That the intellect really theoretically could understand Hashem if the intellect was powerful enough, and it can't. Chachma vatzilus can't understand Hashem because Hashem isn't Chachma. Hashem is above and beyond Chachma. At the same time, we were backtracking a little over here at the end and saying at the same time Hashem is a Chacham, a Chassid, and a Gibar, but that is because it emerges from Hashem, and Hashem expresses Himself in that way. And we'll have a deeper understanding of that, Emir Hashem, in what we talk about next week. But before we go, we have in this week's Parsha, we have an idea which is very relevant to the larger discussion we're having here at Hayichud Vehaemunah and about the idea of Achdus Hashem. And it's also about, also relates a little to what we spoke about in the earlier chapters about Kriyas Yamsuf. We spoke about this week is the week of Kriyas Yamsuf, and we have Kriyas Yamsuf was one of the big themes in the earlier chapters of Hayichud Vehaemunah, the way the wind holds up the waters, the same way how Hashem has to constantly infuse creation with energy. So the pasuk says that after the sea splits, so it says that Hashem tells Moshe, okay, now it's time for the water to go back on the Egyptians. And the pasuk says, Vayashav Hayam, the Moshe lifts up his staff, Vayashav Hayam lifnois boiker le'esanai. That it was about, the morning was about to arrive, and the sea returned le'esanai to its strength. Chazal, brought down in Bereshis Rabbah actually, Chazal say, what is the le'esanai? So the word le'esanai has the same words as, the same letters as the words litnoi, which means to its condition. And therefore Chazal says that Hashem made a condition when He created the sea. He made a condition that when the Yidden come, when the Yidden approach you, you should split for them. And if you don't split for them, then I will revert you to nothingness. And therefore, when the Yidden approached the sea, it had no choice but to split, because that was the condition. It was created on the condition that when the Yidden arrived, it would split. Nice medrash. I think on many occasions we've demonstrated how the Rebbe takes medrashim which are nice and are cute, and the Rebbe analyzes them and breaks them apart a little sometimes. So the Rebbe asks a simple question: why did Hashem have to make that condition? Create the sea, and when the time comes for the Yidden to pass through, Hashem should tell the sea, split. The same Hashem who created the sea can't command it to split? Does the sea have an option not to listen? What is the purpose of this condition that Hashem made? Moreover, the Medrash over there continues and says the same thing is with all the nisim. All the nisim that there are preconditioned. In other words, when Hashem created the moon, He said that when Yeshua, the sun, when it says that when Yeshua comes to Givain, you're going to have to stop for him, and that's the condition on which I'm creating you. And again, all of these raise the same questions. Why does Hashem have to make these conditions in the beginning? Isn't that, if anything, that seems to show weakness on Hashem's part? It seems to indicate that once Hashem creates the object, He chas v'shalom loses control over it, to the extent that if He wants to later on in time, He wouldn't be able to exert His will on them, but only because of the pre-existing condition.
Creation was finished on Shabbos.
And therefore
you can't have any creations after that.
Okay.
So the condition was built in so that He wouldn't have to create anything after that.
Okay. It's possible that's the Shivim Panim Latera. There are many different ways of understanding. I'm not negating that, but the Rebbe gives a different answer. He says, of course Hashem could have commanded the sea to split. And it would have split. But in that case, when the sea would have split, it would have been contrary to the nature of the sea. Hashem would have to override the system in order to bring about the splitting of the sea. The nature of the sea is one thing, and Hashem, in order to impose His will on this world, has to override nature. And Hashem didn't want that. Hashem doesn't want that. As mentioned many times before, the implication of Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah, the implication of Achdus Hashem, the unity of Hashem, is that now Hashem doesn't have to override a world. Everything is already built into the system. Everything is godliness.
I think that's the same thing that I was saying.
Okay. Maybe possibly in different words. Dira b'tachtonim, when we're tasked over here with our job is to bring godliness into the world, it's because the world is already receptive to godliness. Hashem made a condition before creation began already. Everything is the world is receptive to Hashem and to Torah and to the Yidden, and anything that's needed is already baked in. It's part of its nature. We're not fighting the world. Hashem had already told the world that when a Yid needs a miracle to happen, that's going to be the nature, is that miracle is going to happen, because we're not fighting the world. We're bringing God into the world on the world's terms, because that's really what a dir b'tachtoina means, where the world itself becomes hospitable to Hashem, not where the world, there's an override, whereby Hashem comes and overrides the nature of the world. That's the true achdus. We talk about Shaar Hayichud Vehaemunah, the true achdus of Hashem is not when we override the world with Hashem's presence, but when the world is a keli for it itself. The world itself is a vessel for it all. But here we have something very fascinating, which is the Yidden approach, the Jewish people, they approach the Yam Suf, and they are in a very frightful and intimidating situation. The sea is in front of them, the Egyptians are behind them, they're cornered, they have nowhere to go. And Moshe turns to the Jewish people and says, Daber el b'nei Yisrael, and Hashem tells to Moshe, Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yiso, tell the Jewish people, onwards. Keep on going. There's a sea. What do you mean onwards? So what happens? So we all know. There's one individual, Nachshon ben Aminadav. He says, yes sea, no sea. If Moshe says v'yiso, Moshe says we're going, we're going. And with total mesiras nefesh and in total abandon, he walks straight into the sea and walks until the water hits his neck. And he's keeping on walking, by the way. But when the water reaches his neck, as we know, that's when vayibaku hamayim, the water splits. But you know what the funny thing is? Here was the Jewish people are standing there in front of the sea. They're all frightened. Nachshon ben Aminadav goes into the water up to his neck. The funny thing is, the water is going to split. Anyway. In fact, already 2,500 years ago, when the water was created, it was instructed that it had to split. There was nothing to be afraid of. Everything was put in motion for the water. It's not, in other words, it's not, there really wasn't an issue. The water had to split. There was nothing to be scared of. The water had already been programmed to split. But the Jews didn't see that. And how do you get the water to split? Through mesiras nefesh. And when you go on mesiras nefesh, in other words, when you go and do what Hashem wants without any thoughts, suddenly all the seas begin to split for you. And why are they splitting for you? Because they always were meant to split for you. But they only actually split when you go with mesiras nefesh. Very, very powerful message in our lives. This is something the Rebbe once said. We have to know, as we go through life, everything in the world is pre-programmed to be fine for us, to help us in Torah and mitzvahs. All the seas that we encounter are meant to split for us. We just don't see it. But the sea knows it has to split. That big difficulty that you have in front of you, and that you think is insurmountable, how in the world? That difficulty itself knows that it has to split for you. It's waiting for you to have some mesiras nefesh. It's waiting for you to jump in all the way until your neck, and then it's going to split. And when it splits, it's not something new. It always was meant to split for you. And why is that? Because of Achdus Hashem. Because Hashem, everything, the mitzias of everything is only Hashem. It's an optical illusion. It only seems that there are things that are up against you. Really, nothing is up against you. And in fact, everything is waiting to split. Everything is waiting for you to just show a little mesiras nefesh, and everything then is fine. Shabbos, everyone. To be continued next week.